Welcome back to the Joseph Graham Show. Today I'm super excited. I have my buddy Jim Burgoon on. And here's the crazy thing. Jim, how long have we known each other now? Like
It's
three,
been
four
several years.
years?
Yeah, something like
Yeah.
that.
It's just interesting because some people you meet and you're like, okay, maybe I'll get to know them. And some people you meet and it's just like family. And you've really fallen into more of that family category. As we get into this, our backgrounds are very similar in certain things. So it just kind of makes sense. But I want you to tell people who you are in your own words.
Yeah, that's a long conversation, but quite frankly, what I'm doing now, let's start with there. I am a leadership and life mentor. I choose mentor because I find coaching, I just don't want to give you three steps and be done. I want to actually walk alongside with you. So I'm leadership and life mentor. My story, prior military, prior pastor, prior school teacher where I worked with as a behavioral specialist with special needs students, and now I am an online coach. So.
I like it. I like it. What you just like zip past a bunch of stuff. Okay, one. Prime
I did.
military, first and foremost, thank you for your service. Not many people do that, so I have high respect for anyone that's been in the military, any branch. What branch were you in?
I was in the Coast Guard.
Nice. So did you actually
Yeah.
get to go out on the boats and stuff, or did you have more of an administrative thing, or
No, no, no. I was on the boats. I actually was on station on a ship for 2 years. In fact, we were the first Coast Guard ship in a wartime situation in over 50 years. So when I got in, it was 1998, and
Mhm.
I was stationed in Norfolk, Virginia, or Portsmouth, Virginia, on the 901. It was the Coast Guard Cutter Bearer, medium endurance Coast Guard cutter. And we were supposed to have a European tour. It was just happened to be that way. So get this picture. I'm a punk kid out of Philly, just got out of boot camp and then get stationed on a ship. I didn't like boats at the time, which is really even funnier. And so I'm stationed on the ship, and they're like, "Yeah, we're gonna do a European tour." We said we have to go cross transatlantic on the boat, and I'm freaking out. I'm like, "Yo, dude, like just put me under, just wake me up when I get there." And while we're doing our thing, they go, "Hey, you're going to go to Kosovo, Albania during that conflict." And we're like, oh, great. And so they redirected us and we ended up going to doing transatlantic. We did
Mhm.
in a 270-foot medium endurance cutter from Portsmouth to Virginia to Rota, Spain is where we landed. We went around and then we ended up in the Adriatic for several months, a little while doing escort duty for the Navy ships, getting the guys safely to shore, making sure nobody, no insurgents or anything came in the waterways. I mean, there's a whole lot to it, but and then even at night we would watch like the bombs go over us to the land. Like it was crazy, man. And and so we spent time over there. When we were released from duty, we did a European tour and then we came back. So
Wow. That's interesting because you never think Coast Guard is going to be involved outside the U.S. borders because Coast Guard, like you think that
right.
way. So you signed up, you probably never thought, I'm sitting in the Adriatic, which is beautiful by what I've heard. I've seen pictures. I haven't been there. It's one of my lists. I'm
Gorgeous.
gonna go to the Mediterranean. I haven't been to Europe, but we'll talk about that in a minute. I've been everywhere else. It's crazy. But like I'm just pitching this punk kid, like you said, out of Philly, not even liking boats that much. Why did you join the Coast Guard if you didn't like boats that much? Like there's other branches, or did you think like I want to understand that.
So that's an interesting question. So when I left to join the military, like I'm a free spirit. Like I am your typical, like, for you guys who follow me, I'm a disc personality certified consultant, and I'm a high IS personality. Like I like free spirit all the way. You think free spirit? I am that guy. I'm a type 7 Enneagram. Like I'm the free spirit. But I was in like a really bad situation. I was in abuse. I was in growing up, just lots and lots of challenges. And I said to myself, I need a way out. And I
Mhm.
had seen so much, whether it would be the situations I grew up in, the abusive situations. I also grew up in Philadelphia, so like I've been shot at, I've been, held at gunpoint. Like I have had so many things throughout the course of my life, and most of the people I grew up with are dead from one reason or another. And I said I wanted to join a military where I didn't have to learn how to kill because I had seen enough death.
Mhm.
And Coast Guard was the only one that came to mind. I thought
Yep.
about Air Force. I actually thought about going Air Force first, but I was going to be a pilot. I wanted to be a fighter pilot. Go figure that one
Nice.
out.
Top Gun. Let's
And
go.
my eyes were just too bad.
Mhm.
I don't have my glasses on now, but I have to wear them all the time. And they were like, "Yep, your eyes are just not right. You can't be
Yeah.
in you can't do this." Because my scores were fine. My ASVAB scores were off the chart, but I just didn't have the physical stuff I needed for it. So I joined the Coast Guard, and that's the rest is history. Because my thoughts were, I want to join to learn how to save people, not shoot
Mhm.
at people, because I have already witnessed a bunch of that growing up.
You said something there that made me go two places. I want to go two places, but I
Sure.
want to highlight what you just said there. I wanted to join to save people, not hurt people, which in my
Right.
mind makes me go to, so that's where the becoming the minister afterwards probably played into that. But I can't skip the original part. You got in the Coast Guard because you were in a very bad situation in
Yep.
Philly. And it sounds like, and we can talk as much as you want or as little as you want. I'm not trying to push you.
Yeah.
It
I'm an open book.
sounds cool. It sounds like at home was bad, and where you lived in Philly, not everyone in Philly is bad, I know this, but where you lived in Philly was more of a rougher
Oh yeah,
area.
it was a hot
So
mess.
I think my first question is this. I see this in entrepreneurs a lot, the people that really want to forge new things. They want to change the world around them because their original world was bad, or they have a trauma uh story, something like you literally said, like just no big deal. Oh, I got shot at. Oh, I was held at
Mhm.
gunpoint. Oh, I grew up rough in a rough neighborhood. 90% of Americans, and 90%, I'm gonna say of Americans, I don't know the statistics around the world, probably did not have that type of life. They might have had a school bully, maybe getting a fist fight or something, but let's dig in there a little bit more. So when you were growing up, was
Mhm.
it your neighborhood that made you push to become who you are? Was it your home life? Walk me through Jim when he was young and what you had to deal with.
Yeah, absolutely. And the answer to both your questions is yes. So on both. So growing up, um, I have a Swiss cheese memory for some of this. To just give context, I'm currently diagnosed with complex PTSD, and something called dysthymia, which is high functioning depression. And so, like growing up, I grew up in a very chaotic situation in the house. My dad, I have very brief memories of abuse. He abandoned us when I was 4. I saw him again when I was 6 one time. Haven't seen him since, right? And I'm about to be 47. So it's been about 41 years since I've seen anything. Mom was very challenging in as much that I love my mother, but my mother was undiagnosed on some things, and that bled into a lot, which means anytime I did something childish or did something even mildly rebellious, I was beat. I was beat with stuff. I've been beat with poles. I've been beat with books. I've been beat. If it
Mhm.
was in the hands, and one of the jokes of being growing up north, if they can reach for it, you were probably hit with it. That
Yep.
was my
Yep.
upbringing. I had my sisters, and then it became I was the black sheep, and my sisters were the favorite children. And
Mhm.
so like we had this dynamic in the home life was I was never good enough. I was never talented enough. I wanted to be a musician and I was told you have no talent by my mom and my grandmother. And so it really rocked me. And I was doing things like for instance, Joe, by the time I was 12, I had 3 businesses going.
Mhm.
And they were profitable for 1980s. And so like then I was like I was going to be a musician. I wanted to be a professional trumpet player and maybe even teach a little bit. And all of that was taken from me at a young age because I kept getting told you're no talent. The emotional and mental abuse that was present from my mom, the physical from my dad. And then I was severely bullied as a kid because I was one of the smartest kids in school. And I
Mhm.
don't say that like, oh, look at me, I'm smart. No, like given it over, I would have given that away because it meant I was a target, especially in the inner
Yep.
city school. I was a target. I was overweight, so I had those issues, and smart, overweight, and then so people would bully me. And there was one year, my fifth grade year, where 6 of them got together and systematically bullied me to the point of a suicide attempt
Mm.
for almost the entire year. And that was like, and I've had like 3 or 4 throughout my childhood. And I'm giving you the abridged version for time's sake. When I was 10, I watched my grandfather choke to death. When I was 12, my sister got a brain tumor. Like, and there's just this a lot of both in schools, outside, like a block from my house, my cousin was gunned down. like this is what I lived in. And the time we were shot at, like we were walking around the neighborhood, sat on my friend's step, just kind of chilling out, talking, like how little kid,
Yep.
teenagers
Hmm.
do. Bullets start flying down the street. Like, well, that's one thing. I was going to school. I went to high school that was downtown. We were in the bus stop. Two guys are fighting. Guy pulls out a gun and points it at all us students. Like it's like this was the type of environment I grew up. Very hard,
Hmm.
it wasn't very encouraging. And then I dealt with emotional, mental stuff, and I was fighting all the time. And then even as a kid, I was being beat a lot, whether it be my mother or my father before he left. So this was kind of what it really developed it, put me through. Yeah.
No, no. Well, first, bro, that's not cool. I have some similarities, not as crazy as that, but I was the kid that was bullied in a little country town and all that type of stuff. And yes, and I love my parent. It wasn't to the degree yours were, but they were still old school country. If they could grab it or you had to go get the switch, that was kind of what happened back in that time frame.
Right.
Yours sounds a lot more like abuse. Mine was more they didn't know better. Like
Right.
maybe they did, but you know what I mean? Like there's intent
I totally
and
get it.
there's action. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So here's the question I was going, okay, I see the trauma, the craziness that you had to deal with.
Mhm.
You go to get into the Coast Guard. Is that where, because I know you well enough, I know I can ask you this way. Is that where you found Christ and that was when you made the change, or was that after the Coast Guard? How did you go from trauma, craziness, Coast Guard escape to then you were a pastor? Like there has to be a story in the
Oh, there is a
story. So
there is
let's
a
go there.
yeah. There's levels to this story, man.
Lay it.
I'm like Shrek. I'm an onion, bro. It's just layers.
Well, I
It's
like to
like,
peel onions, so let's go.
come on, man, let's peel some. So, when I was in elementary school, interesting enough, I actually wanted to be a priest. That's all I knew. It's the only context I knew. Because we were Catholic school, we're in Middle Philadelphia, that's all that was. Or if there
Hmm.
was anything else you didn't know about it. So that's what I was going to be. But because of all the challenges, all the abuse, and all the stuff I had to endure, when my grandfather died, I literally looked out my window and said, God, you're dead. And at age 10, I became an atheist.
Hmm.
Age 10, I became an atheist. I was alone. I was just lost. I was like, I don't believe in God. I don't believe in anything. Fast forward that a few years later, a witch coven actually invited me in to be because they were the only ones that actually paid attention to me. I started
Hmm.
practicing witchcraft. So here I am. I'm an atheist practicing witchcraft. Go figure that out. And then I joined, all that other stuff. I graduated high school, still an atheist in witchcraft. I joined the military.
Hmm.
Not even,
Hmm.
Christ wasn't even a thing. Nothing. Then I met my wife. At the time, she wasn't my wife, but this was
Hmm.
2.5 years in. So we're talking like I'm sitting here like 20, 21 years old, maybe, and I just meet my wife, and she gets saved 2.5 years before I do, something like that. And then so we're going through this whole conversations and stuff. She would read the Bible to me, and I would cuss her out. Like it was bad. Like she would open up the Bible, and I'd walk out the house. I couldn't. And then I was 25, 26 years old, and I went, through a series of events. I said yes to Jesus. And then, like, literally, I went from atheist, witchcraft, yes to Jesus, 6 months later in Bible college. Like, it was such a fast turnaround. It was
Hmm.
crazy.
Well, hold on, because I'm something here. You met your wife.
Yeah.
Did you guys get married before you came to Christ and all that? Was she that like?
No. Well,
How did
yes
this?
and no. So,
Okay.
yes and no. So, here's what's funny. So, my wife was trying to attend church. I refused to go.
Hmm.
And I went one time. It was the craziest experience. Like I felt like I was going to hit by lightning kind of experience, and I was
Hmm.
oh, because it was so like awkward for me.
Yep.
Well, we'll say like a few months later, I asked her to marry me, right? So
Hmm.
we're gonna get it married, and then the church actually started telling her if he doesn't become a Christian, leave him.
Hmm.
And my wife, heard from God. Now, for the benefit of of your show and your listeners, when we say we hear from God, it is not a audible hearing; it's an internal leading
Hmm.
for a Christian. It's where the Holy Spirit leads us and guides us internally. And my wife was led, and she felt like the Holy Spirit was leading her and saying, "No, don't listen to him. Don't leave him."
Hmm.
Because they had all said, every one of them, the pastor all the way down said, "Leave him."
Hmm.
And inside she felt, "No, I can't. The Lord doesn't want me to leave him." So she stayed. 6 months later, um, after
Hmm.
arguing with the youth pastor for 4.5 hours, my prayer wasn't the typical, um, I repent, I do these things. My prayer was, all right, God, I don't like you,
Yep.
but I'm going to learn to love you. I've tried it my way, and now I'm going to try it your way. That was my salvation prayer.
I love that. I
That
love
was
that.
it. And because the salvation prayer isn't in the Bible, so there's no like you need to pray this or you're not saved. That's not in the
Hmm.
Bible. And like I said, yeah, I said, that was my prayer. God, I don't even like you. I didn't even acknowledge you existed, but I'm acknowledging you now. And let's just
Hmm.
see where this goes. It was kind of a let's just see where this goes. And literally right after that, that was actually on Thanksgiving Day, 2 o'clock in the morning. Um, I literally my life changed completely. Things just were different. Like I said, less than 4 to 6 months later, I'm in Bible college. And I'm learning how to be a pastor, how to be like different things with people who've been Christians their whole life, and I had been Christian like 4 or 5 months.
Here's the thing, and this is the thing I know about you. First and foremost, that's a good woman that listened to God
Hmm.
and knew that even though a lot of people could say biblically you guys shouldn't have been, like if you follow the things, don't be unequally yoked, blah, 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 whatever. But she knew how to hear from God and believed in you enough to do that. And then the youth pastor argued with you for 5 hours or however that worked. And you also said this, it's true. You just have to confess with your mouth and believe in your heart. The
Yeah.
confession is how you comes across to you. That was genuine. You didn't
Hmm.
come going, "Oh, you're so great, God." You were pissed at God. And you had a good reason to be pissed at God. And don't take
Yeah.
it wrong. I don't care if you all listening like that statement or not, but there's times when you're not going to be happy with God, but He's still sovereign. Doesn't matter that your feelings were hurt or you went through something hard. Look at Job. Look at all the different people that had to go through craziness. So I just didn't want to jump past that part, but also it
No,
gives
that's
you a
great.
unique advantage to help people that actually need to hear the gospel compared to the people that have been in the four walls. And you and I have talked about this before. You know, I slant a little bit toward organized religion because of abuses and crap I had to deal with in that. Doesn't mean I hate God.
Right.
It does. There have been times me and God have had it out, and He probably just laughed at me like a kid throwing a tantrum. But I think I love this because you're able to go and talk to people that have gone through hell, been in
Hmm.
witchcraft, been an atheist, done all these crazy things because you've also experienced some of it. Now, I'm not saying you have to experience everything to reach out and help people, but it
Right.
positions you uniquely. So I'm gonna let you go on from there. But like as you said, I'm trying to teach Christians. Well, they've been in the church the whole time. If they can't change, that's on them. That's just my
Right.
my theory. If you've heard the message a billion times and you're still stuck, maybe challenge your beliefs and figure out if you really believe it or if you just grew up that way. Maybe make it
Right.
really yours.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of people are hard-hearted, and
Mhm.
they're either hard-hearted or they're just habitual. And that's what makes me sad because like my wife and I were talking, and she said, "Is there ever an opportunity in your life that you would ever leave Jesus?" I said, "No. I don't care what happens. I would never." And the reason being is because I was coming from witchcraft. I said, I know what the other side looks like.
Mhm.
And so no matter what happens, I don't care if I'm broke in a box somewhere in the middle of nowhere or if I'm in the mansion. It doesn't matter. I'm not leaving Jesus because I know what it's like to be on the other side. I know what it's like to see and have interactions with things in the spirit realm that are not good. So
Yep. Yep. Yep.
it's definitely things. And we haven't even begun to you and I haven't even begun to unpack any of the stuff with my wife's mental illnesses and the
Mhm.
25 years of
Not yet.
marriage and that. And I say that all that to say this and said like for your listeners, like listen, if you're on the fence or if you're like sitting there like at the time I was Jesus curious because my wife stood up to me because you had mentioned we were living together, we were, and we were doing everything like married people were, but we weren't married. And my wife said, the Bible says this and I can't do this anymore. And she was ready to have me walk out on her. And I
Mhm.
was like, and it got me thinking, I was like, what kind of God is she following that makes her do this? Like, and it took me 2.5 years of really kind of looking because I
Mhm.
became Jesus curious, even though I was Jesus rebellious at the same
Mhm.
time. And after the 2.5 years, I said yes to God and we went in there. And it's funny because I said yes to God. And we were to be married like 6 months or a year later, we moved it up 6 and 7 months because we were like, listen, we don't want to live outside what the Bible
Right.
says. So we moved it quicker.
Mhm.
I said we were going to be together anyway, so we took our vows serious. And I said, whether it be a year from now or 3 months from now, doesn't matter. We threw a
Yep.
wedding together. 3 months, 4 months later, we got married. May of 2004, we got married, but we actually started dating in 2000. So
Mhm.
so fast forward out of that, I, our first 5 years were crazy, man.
Mhm.
I mean, well, she was undiagnosed. She had been through so much stuff in her own life, and she was undiagnosed, and I didn't even understand why. Like, I just thought it was normal. I grew up in Philly. I grew up
You grew
in
up in
this.
chaos. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I thought, it's normal. But I oftentimes say, if it wasn't for God, we wouldn't have made through with those first 5 years. So fast forward into year 7, year 8, we're like finding some semblance of something. Um, she has a complete meltdown, and I basically told her to get out. It was just
Mm.
like I was done. It was here I am. I've taken enough. I've lived this my whole life. Like I don't want to do it anymore. And I said, just pack your stuff. We'll do everything amicably. I'll take care of you. Just leave. And she did. And I remember the Holy Spirit. If ever there was a time where I can say God spoke to me,
Mhm.
this was it. And he said to me, man, like, and through the leading of the Spirit, he said to me, he said, you're not allowed to divorce her. I said, hold on. I said, you see what's going on here? Like I was pastoring a church at this time.
Yep, yep,
I
yep.
was a teacher. Like I'm like, God, like can we negotiate this? Because I'm at the end of it. He said, absolutely not.
Mhm.
Absolutely not. And I said, okay, because again, I know what it's like to be apart from Jesus. So I am not going to, when I know God is speaking, I am not going to say no to whatever he says, or I'm going to try hard not to.
Mhm.
So I stayed. Um, a year and a half later, she gets diagnosed. And then we started finding, you know, lots of stuff. She's been in the hospital 12 times for suicide. Like there's been a lot. And we've been on podcasts talking about this. So this is not anything that we haven't shared. But like fast forward it now, we're in our 25th year together, man. We kind of sit and talk sometimes. And we wonder about this. Like, had God told me not to be here, we believe she would not be here.
Mhm.
Like legit. Like even two
Mm.
years ago, she had an attempt, like
Mhm.
which the only reason she's not dead is because of God. Like that truck should not have missed her, and there's a whole story behind that too.
Mhm.
And like even passing down to through the church, like when I stepped down, I remember I was pastoring. We were 7, 8 years into this. God's like, "You're done.
Mhm.
Step down
Mhm.
and take her to the hospital. She is not going to make it."
Mhm.
And I said, "Yes, sir." So I
Yep,
passed
yep.
over. It was so fast. I felt bad because some people got hurt, but I was like, I can't not listen. I have to.
Mhm.
And so within literally 1 month, we got a cash offer on our house that we turned down, and it came back higher. Like
Mhm.
ever have a cash out offer actually come back higher? And then so we sold the house in like literally 2 weeks. We started packing it up, and by the end of that month, like the Lord, like God had told us, she was already in the hospital, and she spent 6 months in the hospital.
Mhm.
Like it was bad because it was so bad that the hospital literally had to send her to another hospital to get her to a place of stability before she came back to the first hospital.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah. If
yeah,
you don't mind
there's
me asking, what was she diagnosed with?
she was diagnosed with 6 different conditions, right? Um, OCD, borderline personality disorder, ADHD, PTSD or CPTSD, general anxiety, and bipolar. So
Mhm.
even in that's got layers because since then, 2 years ago, God healed her of bipolarism. Like the doctor said, this is the one that you can't be healed from because it's genetic. 6 months later, like after they said
Mhm.
that, God miraculously heals her of bipolar. To now, we're 2 years past this. The doctors can't even find any evidence that she ever had it. And of
That's
course,
awesome.
yeah. So of course, secular doctors are like, we must have misdiagnosed you. And my wife's all the time like, no, I had it. I believe me, I had it. And God healed it.
Yeah.
And then they removed OCD from her.
Mhm.
So now she's just dealing with the trauma, and and through our prayer time, we've really sensed that this is going to be a process for her to process out the trauma.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Dude, I love this. Like, and for all you that know, I never plan podcasts. We just let them go where they go. But I love the stories and seeing how God can move through things when it's
Hmm.
not a human type of thing. So I'm sitting here going, okay, cool. Your wife decided to go against her leadership at the time in a church. And a lot of people are freaked out to do this, but sometimes you just have to stand on what you know is right. And it
Right.
helps you become a Christian to get saved.
It
Then
did.
God says, oh no, bro, she helped you. You're helping her. And you guys have walked through this path together. Oh, but wait a minute. It wasn't just rainbows and unicorns, and you gave this one gift, and God just made something happen. It was a
Yep.
life of struggles, pushing forward, growing, and learning. And
Mhm.
I'm only mentioning this because I know what brand of Christianity we both were brought up in. And
Right.
sometimes in that brand of Christianity, they go super hyper faith. And if you do this right, God has to give you the mansion, all the other stuff, which, in my opinion, is not biblical. But that's
Right.
just
I'm
my
right with you.
opinion. I'm not going to tell people what they should or shouldn't believe. But I just love seeing the story. It reminds me like actually reading like a Bible story of people who went in faith and kept trusting God even though it wasn't perfect. So I just wanted to highlight that because I'm just sitting here seeing the different threads. And I love that as it's gone along, you've gotten to the point where now God took away bipolarism, which technically there's no way unless God does something that can happen. And
Right.
then other things start to process out.
Hmm.
How did that affect you while you were a pastor? Because I know how different Christians can be mean, just like other bullies. It's like, oh, well, you have this, so you must have secretly sinned. And in reality, you didn't do anything. Life just happens, and sometimes things happen. So walk me through that because it feels like you were born to be a fighter, like a David. And that's just is where my mind goes because every step of the way, from what I've just heard you say, crazy childhood. Had a little bit of time in the Coast Guard, which was okay, but like maybe not as crazy. But you're seeing war, so that's still crazy PTSD type of stuff.
Right.
Get married, have your wife stand on principle so that you guys get married, you get out of witchcraft, you get out of being an atheist. Then your wife starts having stuff, and you have to come in and step up, and it's just that whole web. And then you're a pastor at the same time.
And a
How
school
did
teacher.
you do that? Because that is especially in the brand of Christianity. And I'm just going to say it. Charismatic, Pentecostal circles have that mindset a lot of times. Not everyone, and I don't blink at everyone in that thing, that
Right.
if you don't have a perfect gold membership life, even though the apostles and Jesus didn't get this, that you've sinned or something isn't working right, which is just BS. But anyways, I want you to talk from being a pastor going through this. How did you navigate it, and how did it strengthen your faith, or did you have some more moments where you just wanted to tell God to F off? I know you probably didn't say F off, but I'm just gonna be flat honest.
No, I
There's
got
been
you. I
times
got
when I have. I'm
you.
no
So,
problem. I'll admit it. There's times I told God I'm done.
yeah. No, actually, in all the things, I've never been that close to say, God, I'm done,
Yeah.
because I knew where I came from.
Hmm.
And I knew that no matter what I go through, he'll always be with me. That's all I knew. And everything else hurt, but I knew that. Um, yeah, dude, like I said, there's layers upon layers upon layers of stories. And so like even the church. So here I am, and I do believe in, the charismatic message to an extent. I do not follow the fullness of it. I do not absolutely believe in the word of faith movement, and I don't care who hears that. I will stand by my opinion
Same,
because biblically
same.
there are some things I can argue with this, and some abuses in that. And last year I experienced that, so that's another story we can bring up. But so we're doing the church. When we came down, we were church planners, so we weren't even just like taking over a church. We were actually starting a church from scratch. The
Hmm.
guy who was the senior pastor comes with us. He was my best friend. He is. And his mom gets brain cancer. So a year into our church plan, he goes, I'm leaving. It's yours. And I
Hmm.
didn't even know if I wanted it. Like, I don't think I was ever meant to really be a pastor. I
Hmm.
am gifted as a speaker. I am gifted as a communicator, as a connector, and a leader.
Yep.
I am pastoring is a whole other level of giftings
Hmm.
that I'm just I may have a pastoral heart, but I am not one to pastor a church. I say that looking back. This so
Mhm.
hindsight's always 2020.
Same. Yep. Yep.
But like at the time, I think like in prayer time, I felt like the Lord was leading us that way. I never got a full yes, but I was like, well, let's just do it. And it was more out of loyalty kind of thing because he's my best friend. I wanted to make sure this continued. And what I took on as a potential calling became a calling in the midst
Mhm.
of it, became an assignment. And we did great. I mean, we grew the church 100 some people. We had like 100 people over times get saved, delivered, healed. We saw lots
Mhm.
of healing. I absolutely believe in healing. Uh,
Same.
that's another thing we can talk about later. Um, but during this time, so my wife is and let me just say this as we precursor this. My wife is the most courageous and brave person I've ever met in my life. Where most people are complaining about like what they feel. Like I have chronic illness. I work, my body hurts all the time. She fights for her life every day. She is the most
Mhm.
courageous and brave person I've ever met. And so like so she's digressing and she's getting this is the worst she's ever been. She's in the hospital, in and out. Like the first time she was in the hospital, she actually had to be taken off in handcuffs because she self-reported and they arrested her for it.
Mhm.
Because that was part of the protocol. It wasn't that it was she was doing anything wrong. They have to put you in handcuffs because to make it safe
Right.
for her. So she's being off that, and I'm sitting here like, oh my gosh, I'm like, my whole thing is like all over the place. So I'm at the church. And when we pulled on a person to do the worship music, I had no idea the person was narcissistic,
Mhm.
like legit. And there was times where she was trying to run the church, and I would have constant conflict and trying to get her to step down, or I didn't want her to step down because then what about the music? And I was worried there would be no
Yep.
music. And I mean, just all of this level of tension and stress was there. And she sabotaged a lot of the band. Like we were building a band and they all left for some reason. I never knew why. The previous worship leader under the old, my best friend, she left because I wasn't him. So she left because of not him being there. The new person, I picked the wrong person.
Mhm.
Um, because again, I was more like trying to make this thing run as opposed to stepping back as a mature leader because I wasn't at the
Mhm.
time. And I picked her, and it just was a hot mess. The stress levels, the she yelled, her and her husband yelled at me for hours one day for no reason. I'm like, why are you guys yelling at me? Like it was just crazy. And then like a week after that, he pulls a gun on her. Like it's like this level of
Wow.
like a weekend. Like so here's something like Joseph. So like I say yes to the church. A week into being yes the pastor, June 9th, I think this was back way back when 2009 or 2010 when I took the church over, right? We had an incident where uh the drummer's wife stepped out of the bathroom and her baby drowned. 7-month-old baby made national news. So within 1 week, I'm having to bury a 9-month-old, figure all this out with them. And now I'm like, this made national news. And I'm sitting here like, oh my gosh, I am not ready for anybody showing up at the door for national news.
Yeah.
And like, oh, dude. And there was this thing after thing after thing. And it came down to it to where, and then it's at school, I'm a brand new teacher. I'm like, I taught fifth grade, and some of the administration didn't like me because I was a Christian, and so they were trying to
Mhm.
fire me at every turn, but they could never because I do my job. I'm not
Yep.
sitting there
Yep.
trying to proselytize. I'm just who I am. And so yeah, going through that, I often joke. I said, what got me through that was Jesus and caffeine.
Mhm.
Because like some days I don't know how I held on some days, man. And I think you're right. I think because of everything I've been through, I was bred to be a fighter. And I just never had this give up attitude. It was just take one more step. We're going to get through this. Just take
Mhm.
one more step. We're going to get through this. And every time I took one more step, we got through it. And the steps became not easier to take, but I became stronger in taking them.
Yeah.
And admittedly, I do have to deal with like autoimmune issues and I've got the CPTSD. Like I deal with the ramifications and the consequences of a lot of that. But getting through it, it was definitely that mentality of I just need to take the next step. I wasn't even vision casting for 5 years.
Mhm.
I was like, just keep my wife alive till tomorrow and then we'll start over. keep the church alive till tomorrow and then we'll start over. Like, make sure I show up to work and we'll start over. Like, that's the mentality I was for several years.
Mm. Well, so I want to go two ways here. I'm going to go this way first.
Yeah.
How, I know you've been kind of talking about it, but I'm sure there's more to this. How did you stay? Was it just a choice to stay committed in relationship with your wife, in relationship with the church, and what you were doing just because once you make the commitment, you're that guy, you're not going to give up? Or how did you navigate that? Because I know there's a lot of people in our world, and I love this topic because too many times we only see the highlight reels instead of the
Right.
real life that happens when you're building a life that you want to wake up to. And even sometimes when it goes completely the opposite way, you know my story some too. I've had some crazy turns where I'm like, I did everything right. They told me to do this and this is what's going to happen. And it didn't. So was it just, and I'm not trying to be cliche. Was it just your faith in God and your relationship with Him daily that carried you through, or was there other? I want to hear it in your words. I'm trying to understand how you went through this because most people honestly would have folded multiple
Yeah.
times in the story that you said. Most people would have folded.
So I think this goes two ways. There's what my attitude and mindset towards my wife and
Mhm,
my attitude and mindset towards my mission, my
mhm,
assignment. Okay. So let me talk about my wife first because that's kind of more of the straight arrow with this one. And I'm a different breed when it comes to this. And it comes down to, yes, my faith is foundational in everything. So everything I'm about to say, regardless, faith is number one. But even beyond that, I think what we miss in life is commitment. And we want to flirt with commitment, never be truly committed.
mm,
Because what happens is when the rubber meets the road and life gets hard, you're going to find out how committed you truly are. And when I told my wife, like when we started going through this after we had already gone through some craziness, and now she's diagnosed, now she's in and out of the hospital. I don't know if she's going to hurt herself, hurt like this, the level, man. We could do a whole podcast on just what it's like to live in that alone. And I told my wife two things. I told her number one, I took my vows very serious because they're covenants and I don't break covenants. You know, I didn't promise her to be with her until death do we part or in sickness and health. I said, I'm going to love you no matter what until the end of the day I die. And I made that was a lifelong covenant for me.
mhm.
Like when we made our vows, she was not diagnosed.
Right.
So who am I to sit there and say when she's diagnosed, regardless of the diagnosis, oh, just kidding. That vows were just for show. No, I took those very serious. And the other thing was she had developed those mental illness because everybody in her life told her she was unlovable. And
Mm,
I said I was going to make sure that she knew that she was worthy of love.
mm,
And to this day, if she ever comes on your show, which she does do podcasts, but if she ever comes on your show, she will tell you that she is able to experience God's love because she saw it first in me.
mm.
I had no idea. That was not why I was going into that. I had no idea that was going to be a consequence of that, like a positive
Yeah.
consequence.
Yeah.
None.
Yeah.
All I knew is that this woman is who God gave me to steward. She was my wife. I was her husband. My assignment first and foremost was to steward our relationship, regardless of how messy or how ugly it got. That's what it is. I had a word from the Lord. You are not to get divorced. Okay,
Mm,
I've got marching orders. I've got an assignment. Then the commitment, and it really came down to if I leave. Now, there are certain circumstances I told her, like, this may dissolve if you cheat on me or something. Like, there's
well,
some things.
yes. Yeah. Yeah. I got you.
But,
I
like,
got you.
I just want to make sure that the listeners understand that. Because I don't want also to think like Stockholm syndrome or bond is, trauma bond. No, that's not what this
Right.
is.
Right.
But I sat there and I said, you know what? She's worthy to be loved. And I didn't want to reinforce she's only worthy to be loved until she has a problem.
Mm,
And since then, like her conditions have stabilized. I mean, she was in the hospital in September, but now she's once a year, maybe once every year and a half in the hospital, as opposed to once every 3 months.
yeah.
And we're seeing more and more stability because of that attitude. The same goes with the jobs and the assignments and those things, like the church. I stayed because I asked the Lord one time. I said, God, I said, there are so much more people qualified than I to do this. Like tons of people. I was the most underqualified person. And he told me, he's like, yeah, you're right. It's like, well, that's a good start. He said, but the difference is, he says, I could have called them, but I called you.
Hmm.
And until I call you out, I'm going to use this to develop you.
Hmm.
And I said, all right, whatever come what may, thick and thin, come what may, we're going to steward this the best that we know how. And I actually told, I think I told God, maybe not in these words, but I think I told him, just realize that if you're putting me to steward this, we're going to be messy all the time, man, because this is messy. And it ended up being really beautiful by the end. Um, but I had to get through all the garbage.
Hmm.
I had to really, because here's the thing, and you hear it's a cliche almost, but so many people stop short and they quit too early. And I was waiting for the leading of God to say, okay, your season here is over. And the moment he said it, man, I was gone. Like
Hmm.
literally within a month after he said it, we were gone. Like, so it's not like I was holding on indefinitely to try to make something work that wasn't going to work, but
Right.
there were people there that lives were touched that are still doing following Jesus. There was one story of a guy who came in, um, like on Mother's Day one year, and he got saved, and I talked to him, took him coffee, and then took his life 2 weeks later.
Hmm.
You know, but and regardless of your theology of whoever's listening, like he accepted Jesus 2 weeks before he took his life. Now,
Hmm.
you can argue whatever you want, but the Bible says if you accept Christ, you're in heaven. Everything
Yep.
else he'll figure out. Whatever sin was on his life, whatever this, he'll figure that out. But he's in heaven because he accepted
Hmm.
Christ. And he just couldn't overcome the illness and the alcohol, and he took his
Yeah.
life. And so like, but 2 weeks earlier, he accepted Christ. We prayed with him. I took him to coffee. We talked about things. We were trying to get him help, and it was
Hmm.
too much for him. But I have stories like that of where people had some breakthrough, and I can be assured at least that they were encountering Jesus on some level.
Hmm.
And had I shut the church way earlier, would that have happened? I don't know.
Yeah.
But I'm grateful to have been part of that process.
Well, again, your story, because I listened, and this is kind of what I love doing, like picking different things out. And I
Yeah.
had a quote from C.T. Studd, who was, I think, in the 17 or 1800s. Forgive me if I'm not right, I don't remember, but he said, I'd rather build a safe house or a house of safety by the gates of hell than to be in a church steeple. And I almost see that as a thing with you. You're
Yeah.
not trying to you're faithful with what you're given, but you're not trying to build a four walls, do the thing, and these are the people, and that's it. You're always reaching out to the broken, to the hurt, to the ones that society maybe would cast off. But in reality, if
Right.
you look at the Bible and you look at what Jesus did, who did he hang out with? He hung out with the mafia of the day. He hung out with prostitute. He hung out with the lowest of the low in Jewish society and called the religious people hypocrite. And
Yeah.
I think people, when they look at true Christianity, it's about helping people come to Christ. We know God does the work, not us, but just shining light and being the light. And on the thing with the gentleman who took his life, there's a lot of people that die of cancer and other diseases, and it doesn't disqualify them from it. So a disease of the mind, because most of the time when someone takes their life, there's something in here that's going on, doesn't disqualify them from heaven just because you
Right.
think so. Who are you to stand before God and say, well, this is what I think? Were you there when the foundations were made? Nope. Did you create a
Right.
star? Nope. Do you have the power to do anything? Nope. Only
Nope.
within Him. So I love that, dude. Like to me, that's a true church, not the we go to church on Sunday, check our box, and then do what we want through the rest of the week, and then
Right.
maybe go back on Sunday. That to me is just garbage. I love the fact that that's threaded in there. So now we're gonna kind of come up more to now, so people can understand what you're doing now, who you're helping now. You go through the Coast Guard, you go through all the stuff with your wife. You become a pastor to help your best friend, thinking that you're going to work it with him and support him. He ends up going. You take the role because you're not going to leave people just abandoned. When God speaks to you, you have a pattern in your life of acting on it. And I think that's one of the things that's been key through your life, but that's also key for anyone who's listening to God. And we're not talking about go jump off a cliff. If anything ever said something like that, or go do LSD, that's not God. I'm going to throw that out
Yeah.
there. That's easy. Learn
Yeah.
to understand the voice of God and what it is. And is it based off of scripture? Because that can be a protection point for you. But
Yeah.
now, you're stepping into really what you're called to do. But here's the thing. I think what you went through qualified you to do what you do now in a way that will impact people from around the world. Because now, when you go to speak or teach or mentor, because I like mentorship word better than coaching,
Right.
an atheist can relate with you. Someone that's been through like PTSD can relate with you. Someone that grew up with the stories that you went through as a kid can relate to you. You're 100% you. You're 100% authentic in who you are, and that is extremely rare. So I commend you for that. But let's step into what you're doing now, because I would be amiss not to be like, we're telling us all this great story, and it's brought you to this point. So let's talk about what you're doing now.
Yeah, so as we started, I'm doing leadership and life mentorship. Um, Really, I love helping creatives because I is one. You know, I'm a creative type. I am not like you're not. I hate suit and ties. The whole scheduled out thing is struggling for me. I'm on the struggle bus with a lot of the schedules and all the details and stuff. So the reality of it is, the people I've been working with have been more on the creative side, looking to make impact, looking to make profit in their life. Um, and even up till this point, working through who I really wanted to work with had been a struggle because I had worked in so many different genres and niches and, all the things as I went through, even my story. And even as a pastor, pastors are like really glorified life coaches. That's really what we were.
Mhm.
And so having that and then getting my certification as a leadership coach, as a DISC personality consultant, like got that, got my master's in leadership. And so all I knew was that I love developing people. I
Mhm.
love equipping and I love developing, and I'm a gifted communicator. That I know. It took me years to even acknowledge that. And so, like, I started getting into this place of like, okay, I need to focus, I need to focus. But then I was focusing in the wrong directions. I had built wrong businesses. I had built things because I was just trying anything that would stick because I wanted something,
Mhm.
to feel good about. And God took me full circle to where it's like, Jim, just accept the fact that you're a people developer. And so my whole life is
Mhm.
about developing people, even in my podcast, Grace in the Grind, it's telling the stories behind the stories. It's like I don't want you to tell me you've been on the show, and I don't want you to tell me 6 steps on how to sell people better. I want you to tell me why you didn't quit, why you didn't burn out, what were the emotions that you went through it. We had Austin Armstrong on it. He was eating ramen, and now the man's got syllabi.io, and he's like one of the,
Mhm.
big influence. Jonathan Mass, same thing. And the reality of it is, it comes down to I'm a developer of people. And so leadership in life, mentorship. And even beyond that, so my tagline is officially going to be, or is, I help creatives become the go-to authority in their space so that they become more profitable. Because I know, it's a side note, I know if you become more profitable, you'll be more impactful. Because broke people don't make as big as an impact as people who have money. Because there's
Right.
things you want to give to, you
100%.
can't give to. So I realized that all the people I've coached, whether paid or unpaid, has always been about showing up powerfully, showing up completely, and having the authority and the influence to do what you're called to do. And so
Mm.
that's where where I'm in. It's just helping the creatives become the go-to authority in their space.
I love that. I love that. We're not done, but I'm putting it here because you laid that out well. Where can people find you?
Oh yeah, so I am on most socials, particularly so you'll see me stalking around on YouTube primarily is my primary channel, YouTube, Facebook, or TikTok at Lead with Jim. So Lead with Jim. Just type that in, you'll find me. Or over on YouTube, you go www.leadwithjim.live. It'll take you right to the YouTube. On Apple Podcasts, Spotify, you can find Grace in the Grind. I will be starting a second podcast, which is a solo thing, which
Mhm.
is going to be very hyper aligned. It's going to be called what did I call it? Creative Authority Unleashed. And really,
Nice.
what that is going to be focusing on how to build the authority as a creative, digging into episode after episode of all of that. And Grace in the Grind will stay as my interview show.
Mhm.
So that's going to be where I do all my interviews, and Creative Authority Unleashed will be doing all of my um all of my solo episodes because in my mind I need them separate. I wanted to do them
Mhm.
together, but in my mind I need them separate. Um, and I'm going to launch that on the anniversary of my sister's birthday, We lost my sister a year ago to cancer. So we're going to
Mm.
launch that in February. February 15th is the goal date. But yeah, those are where you're going to find me. I'm on TikTok as long as TikTok lasts, but
It's back,
YouTube,
baby.
I know it's back now. We'll see where it goes. But anywhere you look up Lead with Jim, you'll find me.
Yeah. Yeah. I just wanted to throw that one in because today is the inauguration. So that was kind of
Yeah.
fun. My daughter is 10 and she homeschools and she got to watch it with us. She's
Yeah.
just curious. I wasn't pushing her either way on thoughts or anything like that. I just wanted her to see how our company or our country, I say company, wow, our country, functions and peaceful transitions and all that. But I do have a couple fun questions now because we've gone kind of deep and all. So these are kind of funner, a little bit more lighter questions, but I know I can ask you this because I know you, and there's a lot of people who can ask
Yeah.
this. Besides Jesus and the apostles, who is your favorite church father?
Oh, besides the Chief Jesus and the apostles,
Well,
who was
because if
my
not, automatically everyone's going to say Jesus. Like, I mean,
Well, no, I get it. I get it. But you took out the apostles too, because I like some of the apostles. Like, I love how, like, if you really think of like Peter, if you think of how crazy that dude really was, like
mhm,
he was like next level. So he's just cool. And then things like that. But if you look through like a biblical thing, um I love Jonathan. I think he is such a man of faith. Like the whole story when Jonathan was like with his armor bearer, they have one sword, an entire army, and they're like,
mhm,
"Let's go up." And if they say this, then we know that God's going to deliver us from a whole army. If not, we're dead. Like that level of faith is a level, and then that's the day in the story where God had the sun stand still. Like there's this whole
yeah,
level of stuff. It's so cool. I find that to be one of the most uplifting stories and one that I connect with a lot is Jonathan. Um, you know, who else? I like some of the off-beaten people that aren't talked about that have made huge impacts. For instance, like another favorite of mine is Josiah. And Josiah was a kid, and it says in the Bible that he was the greatest king that ever lived. Like with
mhm.
the fact that there was a revival. Why? Because he went up to all the high places and ripped down all the places of worship. And it was like, dude, I want a life like that, you know? Like a life like Daniel who lives uncompromisingly according to his faith, not caring. Like these are the people that I really say, besides the apostles and Jesus,
Yeah.
those three would be my top three.
No, I love that. And the funny thing is that most people don't realize if they look into the stories of the three you mentioned,
Mhm.
they were imperfect people. They messed
Oh
up.
yeah.
They didn't do everything perfect all the time. Because I think a lot of times we look at it and we're like, oh, everyone in the Bible is perfect. Well, here's a few things that might blow most people's minds away. It's not 100%, but 90%. 90% of the people in the Bible were wealthy. They were the influence of their thing. And everyone's talking about, well, it's hard to enter into the gate being rich. Yeah, there was a gate, and it was a small gate that a camel couldn't get through. It wasn't an actual needle eye, it was the eye of the needle. It's a biblical gate. Second, none of them were perfect. David was bad. If you look at what David did, David broke pretty much every sin, but the prophet said he was a man after God's own heart. David
Mhm.
murdered, David committed adultery, David cheated people. Like he did a bunch of stuff, but even through all that, God was able to restore it and help him, which I like David just because of that. I love
Yeah,
Jonathan
I
stuff.
like that. Yeah.
Jonathan is just got that crazy superhero almost type of vibe. I'm not saying a superhero. I believe the Bible is it, but like just two men versus 1,000, impossible odds. Only way that's going to happen is God. And you mentioned this, and I want to come back to it because we were talking about. I haven't talked about this on here before, but I definitely believe in healing. Like when I was on a missions trip when I was 22. I think I was in Bolivia leading 17 or 18 youth. And there was this little kid, and they had a goiter like this big. And I just put my hand on it. And I know me, you know me, Jim. There's nothing special. I don't have healing magical powers, nothing within myself. And it literally went from this size to gone, like
Right.
literally before my eyes. And I'm like, you can't tell me God doesn't do things. Now, I'm not talking
Yeah.
about going online and sending your love seed gift in to get a healing. That is not what I'm saying. I'm saying
Right.
God can heal you and you can see it throughout church history. What would have been your experiences? Because you mentioned that. So I want to come back and make sure I at least touch base on that too.
Oh, I've got a lot of stories in this one. Let me piggyback off something you're saying too. So I challenged my wife last night. I said, go through and read every story of healing in the Bible, especially with Jesus. And you're going to notice a few things. Number one, there was no formula. Number two, there was even sections where Jesus, like the guy at the next to the pool, and he goes, "Do you like the guy's like, do you?" Jesus goes, "Do you want to get well?" And the guy complains, like, and you get this theology of don't watch your words and do this, and Jesus ignored his words and said, "Get up and
Mhm.
rise, take your mat and walk." Like the dude was complaining, he was a victim, like all of this stuff, and Jesus didn't even give it a thought. Like it's amazing how we think in the word of faith or in the extreme charismatic movements that we can command or demand God to do anything. And so in my experiences, it comes back to healing is a mystery. God heals who he wants to, and he takes who he wants to. And that's just what it is. For instance, last year, well, I guess we're in 2025, so this will be 2023, is my mother and my sister both passed of cancer. And I had we were going to, it was a bit on the word of faith side. Became more that way the longer we were there. It wasn't that way always. And I had like half a dozen people tell me, well, your mom's healed, your mom's healed, your mom's getting healed, your sister's getting healed. All you gotta do is speak words, speak words. And my journal's full of entries where
Mhm.
the Holy Spirit was saying, I'm bringing them home.
Yeah.
Like my sister had spent 30 years borrowed time because she had a brain tumor at age 12 and she died in almost 40 years. At 40 years
Mhm.
old, she wasn't supposed to make it out of her teenagers years.
Yeah.
My mom, it came quick. They died 6 months apart, but the whole time it was people going, "Ah, just speak it, to speak it," to the point where I actually had somebody tell me that the reason that my parent or my mom and sister probably died was because I didn't have enough faith. Like I had
See,
somebody
there's
really
that
kind of say that to me.
garbage. That's just
Yeah, I had somebody
garbage.
say
I'll
that to
say it.
me.
That's garbage.
It's absolute garbage. And I had that somebody say that to me. And I'm like, And I had one of the leaders of the church argue with me for 2.5 hours over the theology of healing instead of saying, hey man, how can I show up in your life? Like all I needed was people there.
Yeah.
Like for instance, like we give Job's friends these bad raps, but Job's friends sat in silence with Job for 7 days before they said anything to him.
Hmm.
We're
Hmm.
missing this sitting with things. So for healing things, like man, we throughout the years, God has been so gracious, and I have been part of times where we laid hands on people and people got healed of cancer. Like there was a lady who had stage 3 going into stage 4 cancer. We laid hands on her. She went back to the doctors, gone.
Hmm.
And like and there I was at a homeless shelter. We prayed for a lady with AIDS, gone.
Hmm.
And I've got stories of stories upon these things and dozens of stories. And it all comes back because I've been asked, well, what about the tension when when those people got healed of cancer, but your mom and your sister didn't?
Hmm.
And I
Hmm.
said, you know what? That's up to God. That's not up to me. And the
Yeah.
Lord told me I'm bringing them home. I don't need to question that. Like I want more time with them, but I don't
Yep.
need to question because it was where it was what it was. Did I pray for them? Absolutely. Did I believe they were going to be healed? Absolutely. The healing took place when they died. They're permanently
Hmm.
healed. Like
Yeah.
and they both. But here's the thing. Both my mom and my sister got accepted Christ. I got to through text message of all things, because my mom was never thing. I got to share the gospel message with my mom through text message. This is a woman when I first became a Christian who thought I was living in a cult and almost threatened to never show up at my wedding because of the cult.
Hmm.
And I was like, no. And she was so anti anything I did. Fast forward that to a couple days before her death, and we're talking about accepting Christ. And she said, yeah, I accept that and I believe that. Same with my
Hmm.
sister. My sister accepted Christ. She knew. So this was the things like it's just when we talk about healing, we have to allow God, the mystery of God, to be part of it.
Hmm.
Like if you go out and your theology of his healing is as long as I have enough faith or I say the right words, God's going to do it. You don't serve a God. You serve somebody you can control.
Right.
And the truth behind it is I am going to access my faith in this. I believe that they should be healed. I'm going to let the healing be up to God, and I'm just going to
Hmm.
walk the process and just listen. And so there's a mystery to it. But yeah, like there's story after story, man, of
Hmm.
of healing that I could share, but
Yeah.
and every
Well,
one of them were always a miracle and always miraculous.
I just thought about this because you said that, and attuning your voice to hearing God. My
Yeah.
sister 2 years ago died of cancer as well. The moment I heard it, I knew she wasn't going to make it. And she was very much, and I love my sister, she was very much in church. She was serving at church. She was in one of those type of churches, but like she was serving 100% hardcore,
Yeah.
doing everything, trying to do the works to achieve it. And I think sometimes in that dialogue, one, listen to the voice of God, because I knew, like I immediately knew, and it was a year and a half later. So I made sure I went and got more time with it. But immediately I was like, she's not going to make it. And I hated it, but I knew it. Like I knew it, like just knew it beyond a
Yeah.
shadow of a doubt. But I think sometimes what happens is people get into this thought of if I do this, God has to do that. And that's not biblical or Christianity. The only thing God says that he'll do is if you confess your mouth and believe in your heart that God raised Jesus from the dead, you're saved. That's biblical. He said that you can back that up. There's no
Right.
taking that away from anyone. The rest of it, we don't get to decide how the world works out. We get to choose how we walk with our faith. And I
Yes.
think that is something that people need to understand more than if I do this, God has to do this. No, you cannot pimp out Jesus. I will say it a billion times. You cannot pimp out Jesus. And this comes from a guy that was preaching in a Pentecostal charismatic church that was running the church for a long time and then got kicked out because I started reading the Bible going, this does not make sense. And then I shifted,
Right.
they kicked me out, which is good. I'm actually super grateful they kicked me out. Not a big
Yeah.
deal. Um, but I love that just going down to where's your faith at and trusting God in the process, not just because people get so caught up in their doctrine instead of truth because it
Right.
becomes their doctrine. Well, Jim, you didn't pray enough for your sister to be healed. No, you knew in your heart God was healing her by taking her home.
Right.
That's the ultimate healing anyway.
That is. And I think where the challenge comes in, and this is something that you can even put over, a truth that you can put in your entrepreneurship, your marriage, everything else, is people will trust the process and not the God of the process.
Hmm.
And we put more faith in doing the things of if I do step A, step B, and step C, it always equals D. Instead of saying, you know what, God, these are the steps I'm taking, but you are God and sovereign over all of it. Even Proverbs talks about this. It says the plans of man are many, but the results are up to God. And the reality of it is, and an old pastor of mine said this, and it was the best thing. We were in class. He was teaching the class, and he said, Jim, he said, always make a train route, like a railroad track for your sermons, for your business, whatever you're doing. Always make a track to run on, but then understand Holy Spirit can derail you on the track at any time.
Hmm.
And it really got me thinking because like you're saying, and whether in churches, and these are good-hearted people who are just following certain things, but if they would open up their Bible more. Well, Jim, how do you say that? Well, if you look at the statistics, not many Christians read their Bible. Many
True.
Christians have their theology from a pastor, not the Bible. And
Yep.
that's the problem. And so if we will just recognize, even Proverbs 3:5 through 6 talks says, don't lean on your understanding, but in all things, recognize God, acknowledge God in all, and he'll lead your path, which says he doesn't need to tell you what path he's leading you on. He'll lead you in the right path.
Hmm.
So you understand that if we're so hyper focused and obsessed with the process, we can miss God in the process.
Yeah. No, I love that. I love that. We're going to land the plane. We've talked about a bunch of different things. Is there anything we haven't touched on or any words of wisdom you want to leave with our listeners before we let them go?
So there's enough that we can touch on for future episodes if you ever want to have me back. But the thing I would land the plane on, I mean, I know we talked about a lot of behind the scenes story and stuff like this. So here's something that you just understand again, whether it's in your relationships, whether it's in your business, whether it's in your life, whatever it is, that I want you to commit to yourself. And I personally hope you would commit to Jesus, but maybe that's not your thing. At least become curious about Jesus. If you don't like Jesus, figure out why you don't like Jesus, not based on everybody else, but to really commit to the growth of through the Bible. Like I'm saying, like if you get into the Bible and you start growing and things like that, because here's what I know, and I've experienced this in my own life. When I commit to the thought of what I think it says, I'm all over the place.
Hmm.
When I commit
Hmm.
to the truth of what it says, I'm in the right place. For instance, last month, and I had been a hot mess for a while. and I'm learning how to I'm in healing. I'm in a lot of healing. And last month, I had my coach say that to me. He's like, commit to yourself. And I said, all right, God, what does that look like? So I committed to my rededication, not rededication as in like I'm getting saved again. That's not what it was. It was like the commitment came, okay, I'm not going to abandon myself, God, because you didn't. So I'm not going to abandon myself, and we're going to do this, and you're just going to lead me, and we're just going to do it. When I said that, like January, I have total of 10, 11 speaking engagements. I haven't had a speaking engagement in 6 months, 7 months. I haven't been looking for them really either, but like I've always said, I'm a speaker. And then literally I say, okay, God, yeah, we're gonna do that. I'm partnering with you, God. We're gonna go through because I'm no longer doing the process of everybody says. I'm gonna follow you in the process. I had like 9 or 10 people come to me and said, hey, I got this opening. You want to speak? Like I didn't even seek them out. They sought me out. And this isn't even on my own podcast. This is outside things. And it just goes to show that God will open the doors when you partner with Him in the process and are not committed to just the process. So open that Bible, learn for yourself, challenge some stuff, and really find out what the truth is and how you can actually apply it in your life.
I love that. Jim, thank you for being on. I'm definitely going to have you back. And for all you listening, if you don't challenge your beliefs, are they really yours? So you can
Hmm.
actually figure out what it is you believe and be curious, not with the confines of what you're raised with, grown up with, or told, but with an actual open heart to figure out what it is that you want. And I promise you, you'll hear the voice of God because when you come with a pure heart and just trying to figure it out, He'll be there. Till next time, go be legendary. Thank you again, Jim, for being on. Thank you all for listening. Send this message. How there? I went back to the old school. Send this podcast to whoever you think would need to hear it. Like, subscribe, and until next time, believe in each and every one of you. Thank you for listening.